All right, it is 9 o'clock on a Thursday night. It is time for Prosperity Report Live. We are here live on location tonight at Ryan's Creek House in Ford City, Pennsylvania. Ryan was nice enough to host us. He tends to host us for most of our local county affiliate meetings for the Libertarian Party. And we were here last week for our affiliate meeting. He said, "Why don't you do your live stream from here?" So we thought, "Nah, that's a great idea." So we're doing this live on location for the first time, breaking new ground here on episode 2 of the Prosperity Report Live. We might try this at other locations as well if it goes well tonight. So today we do have something interesting lined up for you, not just the fact that we're live on location, but we're doing something else pretty interesting. But first, I wanted to give you an update on our campaign. I mentioned earlier this week that the signature collecting phase of our campaign was coming to an end. Actually, today was the deadline to turn in signatures. We got twice as many signatures as we needed. We got those turned in to Harrisburg, so we should be good to go. We should be good to go on the ballot. According to the Department of State, we're already listed on the ballot. There is a challenge period until August 8th where we could be challenged, but I don't think with the number of signatures that we got that we will be challenged, because you guys were out and about signing our petitions for us, and we're grateful for that. So thank you for that. And then, so that's it for campaign updates. So for today's episode, what I want to do is I got emailed a survey from Moms Demand Action. Now, Moms Demand Action is a gun control group. I don't know if to be in it, if you have to be a mom or not. Probably not, but they like to throw mom in there just to, I mean, it sounds wholesome, right? Everyone loves mom, so we'll just put mom into our name. But I got this survey and I was like, you know what? I know they're not going to endorse me. There's no way they're going to endorse me. So I thought I just filed that away and thought I wasn't going to touch it. But then I thought, you know what? This is good podcast or live stream material here. We're going to actually answer the questions from this survey live on the air. Now, I did not look at these questions beforehand. I asked Drew, who's here with me, if he would look through it just to verify that it would be fun to go through on live on the air. He said, "Yeah, we've got some fun stuff here." So you'll be hearing the questions at the same time I do. So without further ado, Drew, you want to ask our first question?
Yeah, let's jump into it here. This is the Moms Demand Action Gun Sense candidate form. And it starts off with not a question, but a checkbox, which I think is interesting. You cannot advance the form until you check this box. So the prompt is, every town for gun safety and Moms Demand Action are committed to creating a movement and culture that is diverse, inclusive, and equitable, and being intentional about the intersectional nature of our work. To that end, candidates who apply for the Gun Sense candidate distinction should not only be ready to commit to governing with gun safety in mind, but also commit to ensuring that their words and actions promote equity across all communities. And so the checkbox here that is required is, I commit to governing with gun safety in mind and promoting equity across all communities.
I think we might not be able to go forward with this, Drew. Could they possibly throw in any more left-wing buzzwords in there? How many times was equity mentioned in that statement?
About 17, I think.
About 17 times we had equity mentioned, gun safety. Well, I do think that people ought to practice gun safety. People are free to own weapons, and you ought to be safe with your guns. And I think that is so I will rationalize a check mark here by saying, yes, I believe in equity. Everyone should have the same rights to obtain a firearm as the United States government does. That is the equity that I have in mind. The government should have no more rights to firearms than you do. We need equity. and we need safety. It's an unsafe situation whenever the government has lots of firearms and the people do not. So yes, go ahead and check that box. I will promote equity and firearm safety.
All right, good, because this would have been a short episode otherwise. So we will go and advance to the actual questions. Number one, do you believe that Congress has a role to play in addressing gun violence in the United States?
Do I believe that Congress has a role to play in addressing gun violence in the United States? I believe that Congress has a specified list of what they can and cannot do in Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution. And last time I checked Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution, it did not say anything about addressing gun violence. So I'm going to answer this with a no.
Okay, so we're going to move that to a no and advance to number two. Do you support expanding the federal background checks requirement to prevent prohibited people from buying guns with no questions asked?
Again, the United States Congress has no authority to even have those background checks to begin with. So I would not only not expand that, I would eliminate it if I had that power. So we're going to go with a big fat no on that one too, Drew. I don't think we're going to get an endorsement from Moms Demand Action, unfortunately.
Well, we have a lot of time left, so we'll see if that trend continues. Let's go down to number three regarding the Charleston loophole. Gives a little bit of background here. Federal law requires that licensed gun dealers run background checks on all potential gun buyers, but the Charleston loophole allows sales to proceed after 3 business days, even if a background check is not yet complete. So the question is, do you support addressing the Charleston loophole and ensuring officials have more time to complete a background check before a gun sale proceeds?
Well, that is unfair that some people have to go through this background check and other people do not. So I do want to close that loophole by not requiring anyone to go through this background check. So, but it does say specifically how we would close that loophole, which is by strengthening laws or something that says by doing. What was the end of that question, Drew?
The terminology was, do you support addressing the Charleston loophole and ensuring officials have more time to complete a background check before a gun sale proceeds?
Oh, yeah, no. I think that gun dealers can make their own rules. Like in a free market society, what would happen would be there would be norms and standards that would be developed within the industry, and people would follow these norms and standards, and that would happen organically. It would not happen with legislation from Washington or even Harrisburg for that matter. It would just be something that happens organically, and maybe part of that is that they look into some safety measures, but that should not be legislation. That should just happen organically. So we're going to go with a, believe it or not, no on this question.
All right, no to number three brings us to number four about red flag laws. Do you support red flag laws, often called extreme risk protection orders, which can help prevent firearm suicide and mass shootings?
No, I do not support Donald Trump's red flag laws. I think that what these laws do often is people who are in a situation like a woman who's in a situation where she's suffering from an abusive relationship, has sought counseling because she's in an abusive relationship, and therefore and even might even have some medication to deal with anxiety or anything like that, is now on a red flag list, and she can't have at that point a firearm to protect her. A firearm is absolutely essential for many women who are in abusive relationships, because despite what a lot of people think, men and women are different. And men tend to be bigger, men tend to be stronger. Women can neutralize that advantage that men have by having a firearm. But red flag laws take away that right for women to be able to protect themselves in situations where there's an abusive relationship. So that's just one example of how red flag laws can be abused. There are many other examples. So we have due process. Due process is in the Constitution for a reason. And that means that you cannot be denied a right without due process. So without a court hearing, you can't be denied any of your rights. Red flag laws say, you know what? Maybe due process is just a suggestion. Maybe we don't need due process. I think that's a mistake. We absolutely need to have due process, and we should eliminate and not add to any red flag laws that exist.
All right, so that is a no to number 4. And we'll go to 5. Do you support robust federal funding for local violence intervention programs that support people at the highest risk of being shot and killed?
No. Again, if we go to Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution, this is not something that the Constitution authorizes the federal government to do. And the federal government is not good at these sorts of things. The federal government spends all kinds of money on mental health, which they didn't spend 100 years ago. And I would venture to guess that mental health in the United States of America is not any better after all this money that gets flooded into the program than it was before we started flooding in this money in. As a matter of fact, sometimes this money creates an incentive for more problems. If my paycheck depends on my community having a lot of people who are susceptible to gun violence, then I'm going to create a community where that fear is pertinent, where there's lots of fear of gun violence. So these programs have a way of just exacerbating the problem instead of addressing it. So no, I would not support that legislation for a couple of reasons. One, it's unconstitutional, and two, it would not be very beneficial. So let's put a no for that one, Drew. I'm really worried we're not going to get this endorsement.
Yeah, it's not looking that way. And your point about localizing these problems and having these government task force that are receive funding and full paying jobs dependent on these issues existing. Homelessness is a perfect example of this. San Francisco, has dealt with a homelessness problem for years, even though they continue to pump more and more money into these government boards that are tasked with solving the homelessness crisis. And the crisis continues to get worse and worse, and yet more and more money gets funneled into these organizations. And so that example of how government funding for programs actually usually tends to worsen the problem that they're created to address is pretty pertinent across the board. But
yeah, the amazing thing about San Francisco homelessness is they could have solved it, which was made clear whenever the leader of China came over and they had the homeless people cleaned up in a week. But these people whose government funding depends on there being a homeless problem, they needed the homeless people to come back. So after he left, the homeless people came back. Yeah, so that is a fantastic example of that.
All right, we will jump down to number 6, which is regarding secure storage. Do you support policies requiring gun owners to store their firearms securely, locked and inaccessible to unauthorized users, including children and prohibited people?
You should secure your firearms. You should not need a law to tell you to do that. Don't let your kids play with your guns. You should not need a law to tell you to do that. So no, I don't support a goofy law that just adds regulation upon regulation. It makes people criminals who should not be criminals, just because they don't have an approved safe to keep their guns in. This is the type of legislation that safe manufacturers will lobby for, because if they get if they get their type of safe written into the law as this is the type you need, then suddenly people have to buy from them. This is a crony capitalistic, or as Gene Epstein would call it, this is crapitalism. This is just the idea that instead of a free market addressing problems, the government creates demand artificially for a product or service. So some people are benefited and others are at the expense of others. So we're going to put a no for that one, Drew.
All right, so we can jump down to number 7. Do you support educating the public about the unique role firearms play in America's suicide epidemic?
No, well, it depends on who they mean by educating. If they mean like government schools educating, government schools are failing to teach kids math. Like in Baltimore school a couple of years ago, there was not a single student in all of Baltimore County schools who was proficient at math. Government schools are not who we need to be teaching any of this stuff. We need to. We ought to be aware of problems of suicide, but that should be taught in our communities, in our churches, in our families. That's how that gets taught. So I think I might be willing to put a yes for this one, because it doesn't say government. Are you in favor of the government doing this? It just says, are you in favor of this education? And I am in favor. I'm in favor of families educating their family members. I'm in favor of local clubs and organizations having educational seminars. So yes, let's go ahead and throw them a bone, and we will give them a yes for this one.
All right, we're on the board with a yes, because they did not specify that they want public schools doing it. Do you support legislation to block abusive dating partners under final restraining orders from having firearms?
No. Again, this would be a way around due process. The due process for getting a restraining order is different than the due process that would be required for losing a constitutional right. Sometimes restraining orders need to be issued in sort of an emergency situation without all of the due process that happens with other types of trials. So I think that we need to be very careful about when we restrict people's rights, and there has to be formal, complete due process. People deserve a trial. People deserve facing their accusers. People deserve a trial by jury if the government is going to take away any of their rights. And you don't get a trial by jury if it's just like a restraining order put out against you. So I'm going to go and say a no on this one. Our streak of yeses will end with 1.
All right, we will go to number 9. Yes, number 9. And a little bit of background is this is on the PLCAA repeal. In 2005, at the strong urging of the gun lobby, Congress passed PLCAA, one of the biggest giveaways to private industry in American history, giving bad actors in the gun industry more protection from litigation than makers and sellers of cars or tobacco products. The gun lobby celebrated the passage of PLCAA on the day it was signed, calling it the most significant piece of pro-gun legislation in 20 years. So do you support legislation repealing PLCAA's special protections for the bad actors in the gun industry?
Well, I have to be honest, I do not know exactly what is in this law, so I would have to look into that more. The way that they use language like bad actors in this it causes a concern for me. You're labeling people before you even identify what they're like. If you presume that somebody is a bad actor from the time you're writing legislation, that's a very dangerous path to go down. Like if you identify bad actors in legislation, you can target populations within the United States, and we definitely do not want to go down that road. So I'm not 100% sure on this. I don't like giving favoritism to any industry, but based on the way this question is worded and the jargon that they use, I'm going to go ahead and say no on this one.
All right. That brings us to number 10. Do you support robust federal funding? Should I continue or?
Yeah, if you stop right there, we could say no on this one, regardless of what this federal funding is for. We could say unless it ends with a very brief period of robust federal funding required to write pink slips for all of the government employees in the process of closing down about 15 out of every 16 government agencies.
So doesn't say that. It does say at least 100 million annually for research on the causes of gun violence, its consequences for public health, and common sense solutions to curb gun violence. So do you want to spend $100 million every year on government research?
There ought to be a wall of separation between science and the state. We do not need to be paying for research, because what research tends to find, what people paying for the research wants it to find. So you see this not only in the gun industry or the gun control industry, but also in things like climate science and other in the coronavirus science. Man, I'm talking like it's March of 2020. Like, who still says coronavirus in the COVID? Regardless of what it is, if the government gets involved, that skews the findings. If I heard a researcher one time say something like, if you wanted to study the behavior of squirrels in Central Park, you would probably be declined for that study, because like, who wants to study squirrels in Central Park? But if you said, I want to study the affects how climate change affects the behavior of squirrels in Central Park, suddenly you do get approved for the funding. So that just the fact that the government is controlling the purse strings affects what research gets done, how it gets done, and even the conclusions of that research. So not only a no to this, but a no to any government funding research. We ought to have a wall of separation between science and the state.
All right. The next question deals with our friends at the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. Do you support providing the ATF with the resources it needs to regulate the gun industry?
Oh, I was so hoping, Drew, that would end with the resources they would need to pack up their desks and go home and not come back. Unfortunately, that's not how that question ended. That question ended, do you support giving the ATF resources to curtail your rights and my rights? And no, the only resources I support giving the ATF is pink slips and boxes to pack up their stuff and close their offices down.
All right, that brings us to number 13. Do you oppose concealed carry reciprocity, which would gut state gun laws and force each state to allow loaded concealed handguns in public, even for people who have no permit and don't qualify under state law.
Could you reread that? I'm sorry, Drew. I need to catch the beginning of that again.
No worries. Do you oppose concealed carry reciprocity, which would gut state gun laws and force each state to allow loaded concealed handguns in public, even for people who have no permit and do not qualify under the law?
Oh, okay. This is a 14th Amendment question here. Whether the rights of somebody in one state apply to them when they're in another state. And according to the 14th Amendment, absolutely they do. If I have the right to carry a firearm in Pennsylvania, that right doesn't go away simply because I cross into Delaware. This is a right that is attached to me as from my creator. It's not something that is given to me by Pennsylvania, but not given to me by Delaware. So yeah, we should recognize people's rights regardless of what state they're coming from or what state they're in.
All right, number 14, guns in schools. Do you oppose allowing federal funding to be used to bring guns in K through 12 schools outside of law enforcement and security staff?
They're going to like my answer to this one because I do oppose federal funding to arm school staff. I don't oppose school staff being armed, but I oppose federal funding to arm school staff. So here's this. This is an area where I think, is this our second yes that we have on our survey? I think.
Yes, excluding the checkbox.
Oh, excluding the check, which we had to really rationalize that one. My pastor would say, when you have to rationalize something, it's rational lies. You're telling a lie. You're using reason to tell a lie. So forgive me, but yeah, other than the one we had to rationalize, that will be our second yes.
All right, and this brings us to number 15, which is the end of page 1. I'm not sure how long this goes, but we'll get a look at page 2 here in a second. Do you support reinstating the bipartisan congressional assault weapons ban?
No.
All right, that one was easy enough. Let's take a look at page 2. Wow, that's a wall of text.
Got left-wing meme writers making these questions, apparently.
This does look like a left-wing meme. All right. All right. This one's pretty easy. Have you been an active participant with a Moms Demand Action chapter, Students Demand Action group, or Everytown Survivor Network?
Have I been an active participant? Is that what that was? No, I have not. If they want me to speak at one of their events, I will go.
Hey, never too late to get involved with your first event there. Let's see. Have you or a loved one experienced gun violence, such as homicide, suicide, wounding, witnessing gun violence?
I've had people, family members involved in accidental gun violence. I don't think any criminal activity that I can think of off the top of my head. But this is one of those issues I think that's pervasive across a lot of political discourse, where people have to have an emotional attachment to an issue to talk about the issue is oftentimes the assumption, which actually goes against a lot of how we practice judicial decisions in the United States. If there's a court case and I'm a judge and I notice that the accused is my daughter, I need to step away from that case. Why? Because I have an emotional attachment to it. But then in politics, we say, oh, well, unless you have had this situation, you can't be involved in it. Really, it ought to be the other way around. If you're too emotionally connected to it, that emotional connection oftentimes blinds you to true justice. So that's just something to be aware of, because you'll see it a lot. You'll see a lot that these emotional people expect you to have emotional connections. Joe asks, "Are we in the same room?" Yes, we are in the same room.
All right, and the final question is open-ended. Would you like to provide any additional background for any of your responses to this questionnaire?
Is this a final question?
This
We got an
is-
open end.
This is it.
Any additional background? Let's just say I believe in following the Constitution and freedom for all, including gun freedom.
I would add too that, especially our friends on the left, right? When they hear the libertarian stance on gun rights, they're often, you know, they can have an emotional response to it, right? And it's not that libertarians don't want to solve the issue of gun violence, right? We're nonviolent by philosophy. Many of us are nonviolent by theology, right? It's not that we don't want to solve this issue. It's that we know that this specific route to solving this issue has led to humanitarian crises by states and governments throughout human history. And so, when you hear these answers and when you hear libertarians talking about taking a strong and firm stance against any sort of gun regulation, it's not that it's not that we don't want to solve the same issue as you do. A vast majority, right? The people that you meet every day, your left-wing neighbor, your left-wing coworker, they want to see less people die. Basically, that's their end goal. We want to see that as well. We have very different approaches to it, and what we try to do as libertarians is explain to people that this specific solution that is being pushed to quote unquote seeing less people die, it's being pushed by people who have an ulterior motive. They actually don't want to see less people die. They use this emotional appeal to get you on board with something that will and has for all of human history led to more people dying. And so I think that's kind of like the context in which we present these solutions, is that we truly do believe, and history shows us that an armed people are a peaceful people. And if we, as Lily Tang Williams said in that gun control debate between Spike Cohen and David Hogg, that the debate is over when we're talking about giving the government permission to confiscate weapons from the populace. No one can guarantee that they will. Actually, I can guarantee that they won't use that power correctly. And so the debate is over at that point. We will not allow ourselves to be subjugated to the whims of these truly, truly awful people that are in charge of the state.
Yeah, and I highly recommend, if you've not watched that debate between Spike Cohen and David Hogg, go out and watch it. It's fantastic. It was really enlightening. You had one of the foremost leaders of the gun control movement debating the Libertarian vice presidential candidate from 2020. It was a fantastic debate. I encourage everyone to go out and watch it. And yeah, to reiterate what Drew was saying, it's not a lot of times we're presented with this false dichotomy of either you support gun control or you support mass violence. And that is absolutely a false dichotomy. I don't support gun control because I've seen way too much mass violence committed when the only people with weapons are governments. It happens over and over and over again throughout history that whenever governments are the only people who are armed, mass violence ensues. So I'm not going to say that if you support gun control, you support mass violence. I recognize the reason you support gun control is because you want to curb mass violence. I think you're wrong in the way you go about it, but I am at least charitable enough to see that your motivation is most likely that you want to curb mass violence. And I ask other people to be charitable with our side as well. We do not support mass violence. We actually would love to see it ended. And one of the ways that we think it could be ended is by having common sense, not gun control, but common sense gun freedom. So so that closes out our candidate survey for this week. It was great being here at Ryan's Creek House. So if you're in the Armstrong County area, stop on by. If you're in the Armstrong County area on the final Thursday of any month, stop by and see the local libertarians here, because this is where we meet most of the time.
Let people know about the signs.
We also have our signs, as you see right here behind me. So if you would like a sign, let us know. Just let the campaign team know. They're not doing much good sitting in my office at home. They'd look a lot better in your yard. Wouldn't it look? My wife would probably be happy if they were out of the house and she wasn't tripping over them. Now, she hasn't tripped over them yet. I have. So yeah, they would look a lot better in your yard than they do in my house. So let us know if you'd like one, and we'll get them out to you. So anything else that I forgot to talk about today, Drew?
No, I think that's it. We're going to be on the ballot, which is awesome. We have signs. We're going to be rolling out a lot of new and cool and exciting stuff for the campaign. So if you're looking for different ways to get involved, to support John, to support the message that he's out presenting to people, stay tuned, because we're going to have a lot of cool projects for you to get involved in. And thank you to everyone who collected signatures for us. Whether or not you were just someone that was talking to your friends and family and turned in a few, or if you were one of the mass people that was going across the state like a mad person trying to collect signatures for us, we definitely appreciate it.
And the people who signed for us as well. Like, thank you to the over 10,000 people who took time out of your day to sign our petitions. We're grateful for that, and thank you for all you've done.
Amen.
All right, that wraps us up. So thanks for joining us here for the Prosperity Report Live. We'll see you back here next Thursday night at 9 o'clock. Have a good one.